வணக்கம். என் பெயர் Thiru.R.Nedumaran. ஆங்கிலத்துறை பேராசிரியர், அமெரிக்கன் கல்லூரி. 67 துவக்கம் 2002 வரை. Hello alumni all over the world. How are you doing? This is Professor Nedumaran greeting you all on this beautiful evening. Where do I start now? It was 1960 and I was 16 years. And as I entered the college, something hit me. First, the tree-lined streets. It was a magical moment. And I looked around and I saw those bricky towers. As I entered, on my left was the Flint House, which later became my home. And on my right, I saw the tall bricky tower, they call it the main hall. I think the first thing that struck me was, as I walked to the campus, the names of buildings. Zumbro Hall, Washburn Hall, Stauffer Hall, James Hall, Binghamton Hall. Amazing. Who are these people? How are they related to the college? I have absolutely no idea. Remember, I was 16, but I heard about the college. All my brothers studied here, and therefore I have some idea. But remember, I moved from American College High School, soaked up to my neck in Tamil medium. The first time I get exposed to the English medium at American College. It was a momentous year. I remember my classes, pre-university D section, I remember my roll number, 293. It was the humanities block adjacent to the faculty room and the Daniel Poa Memorial Library. Unfortunately, I had taken the science courses. I had absolutely no idea of getting into any professional colleges, but by fate, by sheer mistake, I joined. But anyway, there was no going back. But I do remember some of the great teachers. All the classes were held in English. And one of the most significant moments I spent on logic. The professor was Victor J. Sudasan. He comes stylishly dressed and he would speak impeccable, very correct English, and he'll be very friendly with the students. But he was also very strict. And interestingly, I met him in Madison, Wisconsin much later. For me, he was one of the role models. Always on time, at the stroke of the second bell, he would be in the classroom, be friendly, but also in a very disciplined fashion. He will listen to us, he will encourage us to ask questions. Another teacher I remember, of course, was Professor of Tamil, Professor Jyothimuthu. He was one of the earliest Tamil professors to teach Tamil to Americans and other Western students who came to Madurai to learn Tamil. There was also one V.P.K. Sundaram who was into music. But the most unforgettable moment was when the vice principal of the American College, Professor Reverend Frederick Jacob, we used to be intimidated by his presence. We have seen him from a distance, but we had never had any occasion to talk to him. But one day, he walks into our class. He was not our teacher, but he walks into our class, and we all get up, and then he asked us to take our seats, and then he made an announcement. Your teacher is absent. Run up to the library. Run up to the library. We didn't understand a word. We know that he was famous for his heavy British accent. But then one of us caught the word library and then run up to the library. We ran for our lives. But that was a magical moment for me personally. I wondered how could any Indian with English as his second language could come very close to the native speaker and pronounce words like library. That sound worked wonders. The Apple founder will call it, Steve Jobs will call it, in everybody's life, there is always a magic moment. You don't realize at that moment, but as you grow old, you will go back in a timeline, and you know that was a decisive moment. For me, library, it's only a sound, a word, but then it triggered, okay, I can speak like him. Maybe that is going to be my future. So my pre-university was filled with such magical moments in the classroom. But not just the classroom. There is something about the American college. It's not about marks. It's more about how personalities evolve thanks to the environment. Let me tell you something. We had a student union, but he was not called the chairman, the student chairman. He was called the speaker, like in a Lok Sabha or a legislature. The speaker presides over a session and conducts the meeting. So we had speakers. And another tradition of the college invites speakers from politics, from academics, from all walks of life. And as a pre-university boy of 16, I remember listening to a DMK speaker, V.P. Raman. He became a famous lawyer later. And the student speaker, addressed him as the sun, the rising sun of Tamil Nadu, Udaya Suryan, since he was in DMK. But when V.P. Raman came to the mic, he said, I'm not the rising sun, I'm only one of the rays of the rising sun. So I was watching as a young boy. Look at the wordplay V.P. Raman was capable of. Another moment was General Kariyappa, Chief of Staff. He came to address our students at college day. He gave a very good speech, and we all rose for the national anthem, and it was played, and he was furious. We can't play it in a record, as a record. We've got to sing it. Come on, join me, sing with me. That is another decisive moment in my growth as a PUC boy. Yeah, I remember one more moment in Binghamton Hall. There is a stage, kind of platform, as you go into B1. And that is where we used to stage plays or one-act plays. And sometimes we get speakers. And Periyar came, Tandai Periyar. And they brought him, they had a cot, and they placed the cot on the platform, and he sat on it, and he spoke. So look at the diversity of political discourses we heard. And that is unique about American college. And one of the persons I remember was Ponnmuthu Ramalingam. He was a BA economics student. He was the president of Tamil Mandram, Valluvar Mandram. He later became a minister. So it was only 1 year, but I already moved by some of the magical moments inside and outside the classroom, which kind of shaped my future, that I will become a teacher. At that moment, I never realized that I would become a lecturer, and that I would come back to the same college and become a lecturer, and later a professor. But that moment, Frederick Jacob walking into the classroom and saying that word library, with an impeccable British accent. So that is American college. And later I learned that the second principal of American college, Reverend Zumbro, he was the one who was talking about producing great personalities, not percentages, but men and women of character who would be able to serve the people of free India. And he was saying this in the first decade of the 20th century. So that is American college. 1 year, a young boy and all the boys became men, thanks to the magic called the American college. It was 1967. I was 23. I had to become a teacher. As I did my undergraduate and postgraduate programs in English language and literature at Thiagarajar College, Madurai, and I was involved with student union activities. So there was something in me that said, we got to be a teacher. But not many people like that notion. I remember a popular song at that time, or a poem I will call it. Nedumal Thirumaruha Nitam Nitam Unyirava Vatiyar Sahana Vaitirichal Tirada. You listen to these words, would you like to become a teacher? No way. Then I remember Bernard Shaw's words, those who can do, those who cannot teach. செயல்பட முடிந்தவர்கள் செயல்படுவார்கள். செயல்பட துணிவு இல்லாதவர்கள் செயல்பட முடியாதவர்கள் ஆசிரியர் ஆவார்கள். Not very encouraging, but there was always this passion. You remember my days at pre-university at American College, in those magic moments, and my journey through BA and MA convinced me that my future is going to be in front of students. So I got this job as a lecturer in English at the American College in 1967. I was young, and there was this great principal, Dr. M.A. Tangaraj, who kind of ushered in a renaissance in the history of American College. He was principal from 1967 to 1979, and I joined, and my professor was Reverend A.G. Samuel. Pre-university classes were there, and I used to go to many of the sections, and I enjoyed meeting with those young kids fresh from school. For a young teacher to walk into a PU classroom was the most joyous experience. They were 16 or thereabouts, and I was 23, and I had to make an impression on them. And I used to go for most of the sections. There were 6 or 7 sections. So I was very popular among these young boys. And they still remember me. I remember 2 phone calls. One was very recent. He called himself Sundar Rajan from Tambaram, Chennai. I'm sorry, I don't remember you. Sir, you just joined the college, and I was in your PU class, and you taught me Alexandre Dumas's novel, Three Musketeers. And I still remember the way you pronounce Athos, Porthos, and D'Artagnan. I was astounded. Now, how can anyone remember me from that short stint of time? But I guess that's the way the faculty and the students move with each other, always happy, always trying to help each other out. Another call came a few years ago when I was in Kodaikanal. Somebody called me from Kodai Club, sir, one of your students from early days at American College is calling you. So he said, sir, do you remember me? He started, Parthi. I said, are you Parthiban? He said, yes. Are you JKB Parthiban, spinner who was in the cricket team? Do you remember the times we had? I was your coach. And he started crying from the other end because so much time has passed and he is a leading surgeon, a neurosurgeon in a prominent hospital in Coimbatore. So that's a kind of relationship I was able to establish in the first few years when I was focusing on pre-university. Economics, of course, was a challenge. And then I realized for a teacher, three important things. One, I got to have content. If I don't have content, I cannot survive in any environment. The second one, I got to communicate. ஆங்கிலத்தின் மீது ஆளுமை வேண்டும். That I shall not stumble, stutter for words. Once I have the total control over the content, the words must come fluently. The flow must be natural, spontaneous. And I should relate the students in front of me. Not that I have to lower the quality of my teaching or making it too simple now. But we arrive at some balance. And that I learned when I was teaching Part 2 English for quite a few years, particularly economics. And then later, of course, I taught the sciences. And one important factor about the college at that time, after I became a teacher, was a kind of competition that prevailed among teachers. We competed with each other. I had the great Professor J. Vasantan, who was very good at teaching drama as a genre and as a performance. And he started a drama group called Curtain Club, the first of its kind in Madurai. And we used to stage mostly Bernard Shaw's plays. So I competed with him. How can he be such a depth he has? And the way he used to speak English in the classroom and how he used to emote with the characters in Shakespeare's plays. Another competitor I was competing with was, of course, R.P. Nair, Padmanabhan Nair. He was a very quiet guy. He used to teach fiction and prose. Not very romantic, not very glamorous about these two genres. But Nair was a voracious reader. He later became the director of the Skillet Library. But மகத்தான ஒரு ஆளுமை இந்த ரெண்டு பேருமே அவங்களோட நான் போட்டி போடுவேன். My forte was poetry. I loved poetry and I loved Tamil poetry. I always tried to bring parallels, comparisons, which the students liked. And please remember, American College allowed such experiments in the classroom. Nobody interfered. Of course, we had Tangaraj eavesdropping. He will listen to you from outside. You may not be aware of that fact. But he did that for a purpose, to find out how these young teachers are doing in the classroom. That's the environment I grew, the kind of fierce competition I had with my colleagues. a paradigm shift came as we were, growing up as a department. We had BA English Literature, and then a moment came in 1981 when Professor Challappa, the principal, brought Dr. Paul Love from Batala, Punjab, and he came to start the postgraduate English department. That's a paradigm shift, I must say, in the teaching of English language and literature. He built this huge library for us and for the students. And he brought, he drove home the need, the necessity for depth, not only for students, for teachers. I remember one specific year when he asked me, well, you are good in poetry, you better start teaching poetry. And in one semester, first time, I had to teach T.S. Eliot's Wasteland. As a student of MA in Tyagarajar College, I omitted Eliot because I hated that poet. You can't make any sense out of his poems, nothing linear about it, and there are so many references, and you don't know what he's trying to say in that poem. So I expressed my difficulties to Paul, and Paul bought all the books under the sun about Eliot, and that changed my approach to teaching modern poetry. So Paul now brought a huge change in the evolution of English department. இந்த மாதிரி ஆளுமைகள் தான் அமெரிக்கன் கல்லூரி. இது ஆங்கிலத்துறை மட்டும் அல்ல, மற்ற எல்லா துறைகளிலும் பேராசிரியர் தேவராஜன், பேராசிரியர் ஜேசிபி ஏப்ரஹாம், அதுவாக நிறைய ஆளுமைகள், அந்த தனிப்பட்ட ஆளுமைகளால் அந்த துறையே வளரக்கூடிய ஒரு வாய்ப்பு உண்டு. இன்னொன்று அந்த லைப்ரரி, நூலகம். எனக்கு நூலகம் சொல்லும் பொழுது எனக்கு பியூசிலேயே அந்த ஒரு அதான் அமெரிக்கன் கல்லூரியோட தனித்துவம். அந்த ஒரு லைப்ரரி, டேனியல் போர் மெமோரியல் லைப்ரரி உள்ளே போகும்போது, பியூசி படிக்கும்போது நீங்கள் புக் ஷெல்ஃப்ஸுக்கிட்ட போக முடியாது. நீங்கள் அந்த கேட்டலாக் வச்சுருப்பாங்க, அதுலேருந்து எடுத்து ஒரு ஃபார்மை ஃபில்அப் பண்ணி கொடுக்கணும். அங்கே ஆசிரியர்னு ஒருத்தர் இருப்பார். நீங்கள் காலையில் கொடுத்தீங்கன்னா சாயந்தரம் அந்த புத்தகத்தை கொடுப்பாங்க. ஆனால் அவருக்கு புத்தகங்கள் பிடிக்கும். நான் அலெக்சாண்டர் டூமாவுடைய 3 மஸ்கெட்டர்ஸ் கேட்டிருந்தேன். அவர் சாயந்தரம் போகும்போது அவர் 20 years ஆஃப்டர், அது ஒரு சீக்வல், அலெக்சாண்டர் டூமாஸ் 3 மஸ்கெட்டர்ஸுடைய தொடர்ச்சியை எழுதுனது, அதை கொடுக்குறாரு. எதுக்காக அவர் கொடுக்கணும்? இவனுக்கு டூமாஸ் பிடிக்கும். அப்போ டூமாஸோட நாவல் நம்மகிட்ட 3 நாள் இருக்குது, கொடுப்போம். அந்த வாக்கிங் தட் எக்ஸ்ட்ரா மைல், தட் இஸ் அமெரிக்கன் காலேஜ். அண்ட் தட் happened again when Paul came and made a huge change in the way he got books for the students, how he packed the library, and now Skillet is a standing monument. As a teacher, I also came under the impact of how the college respected institutions, அமைப்புகள். For instance, faculty meetings. Right from Dr. Thangaraj through P.T. Challappa, P.T. Jayapandian, they all allowed us to ask questions, to clarify, to discuss. Dissent and debate were possible in the faculty meetings, in those gatherings. That's because of 100+ years of democratic traditions set by Washburn and Zumbro. And please remember, American College was founded by congregational missionaries from USA. Congregational missionaries, that's a denomination. They were known for their very liberal outlook on education. They felt, next to Christian faith, education alone can elevate a human soul. And that is why the congregational missionaries established the Madurai board, mission board, and they were able to to develop institutions like American College or Pasumalai High School. So that democratic tradition runs. And the way it operates at American College, unchanged. And the same democratic tradition brought men and women with the diversity of opinions. You remember 1975, June 25th, when Mrs. Indira Gandhi, the Prime Minister, promulgated emergency throughout the country. And Kalaignar was the Chief Minister. When the American College Union invited him in August to inaugurate the union, do you know the topic he spoke on? Jananayagam, democracy. Right from the days when we had a democratic traditions in our classical past, Kudavolai முறையில் பிரதிநிதிகளை தேர்ந்தெடுக்கக்கூடிய ஜனநாயக மரபுகள். And he talked about that in 75. And that definitely was a radically bold step on the part of the American College. Who would invite a chief minister who was not exactly in the good books of the federal government at that time, especially when the emergency was on? So that is the American College. And he came again when he was the leader of the opposition. And he comes to the college after his partymen were accused of offering violence, preventing Mrs. Gandhi from entering into the city. She came to speak at some gathering. And there was Thiru.R.Nedumaran, Tamil Deshiya Katchiyinuடைய தலைவர். And he was the one who saved Mrs. Gandhi from those flagpoles some of the people were using to have a hit at Mrs. Gandhi. So at that time, Kalaignar was the leader of the opposition. And I was the advisor for the student union, and I have to welcome him when he came to address the student union. அவருடைய முதல் சொல் தொடர் என்னன்னா, மதுரையிலே ஒரு நெடுமாறன் வரவேற்பது மகிழ்ச்சியாக இருக்கிறது. The whole, the main hall roared in reaction. அந்த சாதுரியம், கலைஞருடைய சாதுரியம். We learn from such orator the power of rhetoric in the political history of Tamil Nadu. And there were other moments when Jayaganthan came, the same main hall, packed audience, and one student sent an arrow, almost hit Jayaganthan. And Jayaganthan just got off the stage, walked to the student, அவர்கிட்ட கேட்குறார், உங்கள் வீட்டுக்கு நான் வந்தால் ஆரோ இருந்தால் என்னை வரவேற்பியான். There was absolute silence after that. And Veeramani came, gave a very, in very controversial circumstances, and he gave a speech. Kannadasan came 2 hours late. He never went on time to any meetings, but he came and he sang, and the whole audience was enthralled. But these I call them as institutions. You have a student union, student representatives. They bring people from different walks of life. We listen to them, and there is an impact on all of us as teachers and as students. But I do hope that kind of tradition will be revived, not just in American College, but also in other colleges. Talking about democratic traditions, what about the democratic traditions inside the classroom? I had some very interesting experiences with undergraduate students. We introduced the BA English Literature, I guess in 1968, Flint House 1, 2, and 3. There were about 35 students. Not many would choose English literature at that time. It was a third year class, and I asked them for a feedback about my teaching. And one student got up. சார் நீங்கள் வந்து you are like a steam engine அப்படின்னா. Why do you call me a steam engine? So, a steam engine makes a lot of noise. It roars, and then the sound, peters off, and the engine huffs and puffs and frets, and it becomes silent. Like that, you walk into the classroom. For the first 20 or 30 minutes, you roar like a lion. But the next 30 minutes, you are dead. He says that in the classroom. I think it was in third year of my teaching undergraduate literature, maybe 71 or 72. I couldn't sleep that night. எதற்காகனா நீங்கள் ஒரு நல்ல பாடத்தை தயார் பண்ணிட்டு உள்ளே வந்தீங்கன்னா உங்களால் 1 மணி நேரம் பேச முடியும். உங்களால் முடியலை because you don't have content. So he had that the boldness, the courage to point out that defect in me right in front of 35 students. There was another instance. If you go to F1 or F2 or F3 in Flint House, you have 2 ceiling fans, one above the teacher and the other above the students. So as I walked into the classroom one day, the fan above me was working. So I was getting good breeze. But the fan above the students was not working. So I noticed that. I asked them, what's going on? Only one fan is working. The other one is dead. அப்போ அவங்க எங்கிட்ட என்ன சொன்னாங்கன்னா, சார் அதை கம்ப்ளைண்ட் பண்ணியாச்சு, ஆனால் யாருமே ஆக்ஷன் எடுக்கலை. ஸோ ஐ டோல்ட் தம், நம் கல்லூரியில் காற்று வாங்குவது என்றாலும் கேட்டுத்தான் வாங்க வேண்டும். ஸோ யூ கோ அண்ட் கெட் திஸ் ஃபிக்ஸ்ட். I will come back to the class later. So I walked out. So 30 பேரும் அந்த பேட்ச் யாருன்னா கருப்பழனியப்பனுடைய பேட்ச், the famous director. அப்போ அதில் அவர் சொல்லுவார், பழனியப்பன், இதுதான் எங்களுக்கு கிடைச்ச ஒரு ஆங்கில இலக்கியம் நீங்கள் நடத்தலாம், ஆனால் ஒரு லீடர்ஷிப், ஒரு நல்ல you have a good cause, you got to fight for it. அந்த ஃபைட்டிங் ஸ்பிரிட்டை நீங்கள் சொல்லிக் கொடுத்து, I think that is typical of American college. I have learned that as a student, and now it becomes a kind of collective experience for the students as well as the teachers. Because our faculty meetings, were famous for the kind of heated debates we had over many issues. And that tradition, I guess it still continues. Yet another facet of my teaching tenure at the American college is, I think it was Vasantan who mentioned that in a meeting. To a teacher, only 2 things matter: God and the student. It's very true of American college. As a teacher, I can be in a cocoon. I could focus on my teaching. I don't have to worry about any other factor. To me, I walk into the classroom, the students matter, the text matters, the communication matters, nothing else matters. That lesson I learned through the years, whether I was teaching Part 2 English or BA English or finally MA English. So in all my experience, limited experience as a student, and 35 long years, it was the most enjoyable period in my life, and people are still in touch with me. Many of my students, for example, I used to do a lot of quizzing. Quizzing was my passion. Acting was my passion. And Mr. Gerald, he invited me to be the director of research for Kodishwaran program he was running. And another student invited me to act in 3 movies. Not big roles, but at least you walk in, say a few dialogues, act out, and then leave. But that was quite an experience, thanks to my students. And I think if I had to sum it up in one word, my whole exercise as a teacher at the American College, passion. Mundi ilum oru veri. If I have that passion, I'll be a good teacher. I think the environment in the American College, the trees, the red brick towers, நான் அது எப்போவுமே செங்கல் கட்டடங்கள் அல்ல, செங்கல் காவியங்கள் நான் சொல்லுவேன். அந்த காவியங்கள் மூலமாக எனக்கு ஒரு மிகப்பெரிய திருப்தி. That two people mattered, God and the student. And I think that should be a message valid for years to come for whoever wants to teach at the American College.